Okay, hi everyone. I wanted to take just a few minutes to share with you some ideas to get every student in every subject every day reading through disciplinary literacies or disciplinary reading ideas. So, the ideas in this presentation were taken from a book that I love. You've probably seen this title mentioned in my suggested readings for our course, but it's called "This is Disciplinary Literacy." And it is by Lent, and it's a textbook that I've used in the teaching of this course at Kentucky State when I teach it there, and I would love if you had the opportunity to check out a copy. I think you would really like it. Um, but just because I did not want you to have to buy the whole book does not mean there's not some good information. So I'm going to share with you some ideas from that text for getting every student to read in your course or in your discipline. So I have some criteria for ideas before I'll use them. Before I'll offer them to you, I have to evaluate them myself. And I need the ideas for reading to be authentic to the discipline. So it really needs to be um, some way that reading really does take place in your discipline, or else I don't feel like we should be offering it to students. I think it needs to be relevant to both the students and to your subject area, to your discipline. And it needs to be aligned with the goals that you have, the learning goals that you have, just as anything else, any other assignment that we would give students. We have to have a reason for giving it to them. So reading is an end in of itself, and that's wonderful. But also you're going to be teachers of different disciplines, and so you need to think about the goals and needs of your students in that discipline and align your activities with those. So the first idea is called current events short takes. And this involves just finding an article in the um, current newspaper, magazine, something in online that is relevant to either a topic that you're going to be covering or relevant in general to your discipline. And using current events is a way to make disciplinary reading relevant. You can use articles, graphs, images, um, different kinds of texts, or especially texts that include the types of elements that are really common in your field can be really helpful to students. So, as an example, that I'm posting just under this presentation in our current weekly folder, there's an article on Roman gladiators, and they came up with evidence that these gladiators had used an energy drink that included ash or something like this, and so the article is very brief, but it's really interesting, and it goes in to talk about how the diets of Roman gladiators differed the um, from the diets of other people of the time. And so it's interesting to me in several disciplinary ways. It clearly has an interest in science because it talks about how they analyze the bones to figure these things out. I think it's very interesting from a history perspective, social sciences or social studies perspective, um, because you may be studying that era or something along those lines. And then I also find it really interesting from a health PE perspective because there are so many energy drinks. Your students are going to be drinking them every day, and there are so many health claims attached to these drinks that I think this could be a really relevant way to sort of bring some of those together. So the same article could work for a variety of different disciplines based on how you would read it and why you would read it in your discipline. So, ways to enact this sort of current event short takes idea in your course might be a weekly shared text that you bring to students. Hey, look what I found. This is relevant to what we're talking about, and you share it with them all. Or you could ask students if you have students who you want to have them reading outside of class or picking things up. You might suggest a couple of different periodicals that may have interesting or relevant things, or you may just ask them to keep a lookout and have one student per day or one student per week share a current event with the rest of the class. This does not need to take up a whole class or a whole hour or, any more than 10 to 15 minutes. I think most of these ideas can be enacted in, the first part of class to sort of get students engaged right before you jump into whatever activity you already had planned or whatever lesson you already had planned. Another idea, I apologize if you can hear the dog barking in the background. My sister is away for her birthday. She's out of town, and so we are dog sitting, and he is super loud. So another opportunity to bring reading into the classroom in a real and relevant way involves you reading to your students. So teacher read alouds. And again, these can be very short, but what it allows you to do is to model the disciplinary literacies in action. So you can introduce new concepts or new vocabulary. You can just show how your interests as an expert in this field influence what you see out there in the media, what you pay attention to, how you read it. Also, reading aloud allows students to see a demonstration of fluency, prosody, intonation, other markers of strong reading that they would not get in reading to themselves. So, reading aloud to students, no matter their age, reading aloud to people is useful and enjoyable for most people. This could also be an activity that could serve as a bridge to student-driven read alouds. So if you get them in the habit of hearing you every Monday read something that you found interesting for 5 minutes or so, then perhaps you could offer to have students bring in something and read it to everyone. So that's an idea to get them engaged as well. Sharing visual text is the next idea. So visual text, and I mentioned this when you're looking for current events, but also you can just bring in a visual text by itself. So visual texts that are relevant and authentic to your discipline. So graphs, charts, infographics, political cartoons, photographs. Um, the list is really endless. So those are clearly just a few. But the thing is that when we think about reading, we don't often think about these elements. And these things will, being able to read graphs, charts, and infographics is not only going to help students in the real world, which it absolutely will, and help them in your classes, which it absolutely will, but it will also help them on those standardized tests that we all don't want to have to pay attention to in class every day. We don't want to have to think about them every day. We don't want them to drive what we do. But there still is some pressure that you'll feel as teachers to make sure that your students do as well as possible. And we want them to do as well as possible on whatever, you know, through whatever obstacles they face. So these are things that are really, really helpful teaching students. This is how a scientist reads this infographic. This is how, a historian reads this photograph. So there are some prompts here that you can offer. You can project these on the front screen and share, or you can hand out copies to each student if you have the budget for that. But projecting them onto a screen is perfectly acceptable. You can give them some prompts such as, what do you see? How can you read this text? What's the purpose of this text? What more do you need to know in order to understand what's really going on? Whose viewpoint is illustrated? Whose viewpoint is not illustrated? And to whom is the text targeted? So there are a lot of critical reading things that you can get at, skills that you can get at through visual texts. And I think they can be really powerful. So we can also offer students some insight into the world of blogs or blogging or microblogging even. Microblogging is, if you're looking for educational literature on Twitter, they call it microblogging. So these often, we say, we teach students, that's not where you find research. You have to do academic research. I'm teaching a composition class right now, and I'm saying this. You have to go to the databases. You have to get academic research. And that's great for the purposes of this class. We're trying to help students practice this so they can do that throughout their college careers. However, in our fields, we read more than only scholarly articles. So we pay attention to the real conversations that are going on in our disciplines, in our fields every day. And a lot of those take place through much more casual venues like blogs and microblogs. So these could be used to teach evaluation of disciplinary content. How do I know as an expert who I should trust and who I should not trust? What are the big names of experts in the field that are having these important conversations? What do blogs for different audiences do or look like? So maybe we have blogs on the same, two blogs on the same topic that are treated very differently, and you could show that to students. You could talk about major differences and or similarities between blogs or bloggers, Twitter users, things like Twitter accounts, things like that. You can share specific posts, or you can have students browse a particular blog or a particular user. Um, the thing about blogs and microblogs is that they're often very conversational and engaging, but they still have a finger on the pulse of what's going on in the discipline, what's being said, what are going to be the next big things that are going to be talked about. So stuff like that. They're not irrelevant just because they're not completely scholarly. Um, or peer reviewed, those type of things that we look for in research specific courses and endeavors, I suppose.